cabinet ministers here present, diplomats here present, and my very good friend, the founder of this organization, Engineer Chala Dawa, and all invited guests. Good evening. It gladdens my heart to be present with you this evening. You may, courtesy of history, remember that 62 years ago almost, 32 heads of states and governments of the then independent African countries gathered here in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, hosted by Emperor Haile Selassie. On that day, each one of them spoke about the continent of Africa and the value of our unity. They were as young as you are, but they knew what was necessary for the continent of Africa. One of them stood out in his sense of urgency. He wanted Africa to unite then. He was Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah. He told those who are present, let us not live here without one army, without one currency, without one country. They listened to him not. And an organization known as the Organization of African Unity was created. It played its part in participating in the decolonization of African countries that were then under colonial tutelage. But Africa still remained disunited. Today we are assembled here to rekindle that spirit because we know that there is work which remains undone. While I'm aware that your slogan is Africa, my home and my future, I want to remind you that Africa is your past, that Africa is your present, and Africa is your future. I say so because Pan-Africanism, which is your past, was the handiwork of Africans who lived not only in this continent. The Pan-Africanism that we talk about today was the handiwork of great individuals such as Sylvester Williams of Trinidad and Tobago. It was the handiwork of individuals such as Marcus Mosias Garvey of Jamaica. It was the handiwork of individuals such as John Henry Clark of the United States of America. It was the handiwork of individuals such as W.E.B. Du Bois, and of course, Martin Luther and Malcolm X. We must never forget, therefore, that we have a diaspora in the Caribbean, in islands such as Trinidad and Tobago, Antigua and Barbuda, Martinique, Guadeloupe, St. Kitts and Nevis, Jamaica, and they too must be involved in what we are doing. I also want to remind us that we have always met as Africans and young Africans to reassess how far we have gone. That is why when we thought that the Organization of African Unity was not doing very well, we assembled under the leadership of Libya's Muammar al-Gaddafi in Sirte in Libya, and once again in Lomé, Togo, and ultimately in Durban in South Africa, and ultimately here in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and created the African Union in the hope that it would strengthen integration. And we know that we have made efforts. But let us not ever forget that there are those who love a disunited Africa, that there are those who love an Africa that is not pulling in the same direction. Let us always remember that the spirit of Berlin is alive in certain European headquarters. Because if we forget that, we will realize that after the colonial project, there is an ongoing neo-colonial project. And it is you young Africans who must be the bulwark against this new monster, which, if we are not careful, will devour the continent of Africa. We are therefore gathered here not to lament about the past, but to remind ourselves that the present and the future are children of that past, and that the future is a product of our past and our present. And we here, therefore, are rededicating ourselves, that we will ensure that we play our part in ensuring that the continent of Africa realizes our potential. Young Africans, I will remind you that you are not in the first line to engage in this exercise. It is a marathon race, a marathon relay race. I want you to go out there as you talk about Africa and our future, to remember that in 1906, a young South Africa, Pixley Kaisa Kaseme, delivered an iconic speech, the regeneration of Africa. Today, we are repeating the same speech and saying we want to regenerate Africa. I want to remind you that in 1996, another South African, Thabo Mbeki, delivered a speech and said, I am an African. We are here to remind ourselves that we are Africans. I want to remind you that in 1963, Kwame Nkrumah said, you are not an African because you are born in the continent of Africa, but because Africa is born in you. I want to remind you that Africa must be reborn in us. I want to remind you that Africa is not necessarily, and being Africa and an African is not necessarily the color of your skin, because in 1960, Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe, when asked, what is your thoughts or what are your thoughts about racism, he reminded his audience that there is only one race, the human race. I therefore want to remind you that today we are here to rededicate ourselves as young people and to remember that we are here to salvage the continent of Africa. You know, when Africa Agenda 2063 was hatched during the AUC chairmanship of Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, Nkosazana wrote an imaginary letter to Kwame Nkrumah, apologizing to Kwame and telling Kwame, you are right in 1963. In 1997, Julius Kambarage Nyerere in Accra, Ghana, delivering a speech on the occasion of Ghana's 40th independence anniversary, said, Kwame, you are right, we were wrong. Today, we are reminding ourselves that all those great men and women who came before us were right, and we are here to give practical meaning to Agenda 2063 and the 7 pillars on which it rests. And we are here to give meaning to Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Therefore, without belaboring the issue, As you go through the few days of thinking about Africa, I want you to remember that there is work to be done. Whether you are in Algeria, the home of Ahmed Ben Bella, whether you are in Tunisia, the home of Habib Bourguiba, whether you are in Egypt, the home of that great man, Gamal Abdel Nasser, whether you are here in Ethiopia, the home of Haile Selassie, and the home of my good friend Haile Mariam Desalegn, one of the few Africans who knew when to leave the stage. History will remember you fondly. I'm reminding all of us that when you conclude this conference, when the new office of the African Union takes over, I'm told, on the 14th day of March, present a memorandum to them. And in that memorandum, tell the new office that we want war to stop in Africa. We do not want war in Sudan. We do not want war in southern Cameroon. We do not want war in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We do not want war in southern Cameroon. We do not want war in Mozambique. We do not want war in Somalia. We do not want war in Central African Republic. We do not want war anywhere, because without peace, there will be no agriculture. Send a memorandum to them. I want you to send a memorandum in which you are telling the leaders of Africa, no more meetings. We have had resolutions. In 1988, we had a resolution on freeing the airspace. We had a resolution on the rights of women in Maputo. We have a resolution on agriculture. We have a resolution on health. We have a resolution on youth. We have a resolution on everything. Let us now go into the mode of implementation. If you do that, I am definite in my mind that Agenda 2063 be realized, and it will be realized on your shoulder. Remember that democracy is always retained by the vigilant. And the democracy that I'm talking about is not democracy which is a Coca-Cola-ized version from Europe and America. It is our own democracy, which is rooted in our own culture and tradition. We must do that. And I have no doubt in my mind that when you deliver this memorandum to the chair of the AUC, that you'll deliver the same memorandum to all the leaders of Africa, and you will demand that they do the right thing, that they will ensure that you are involved. They'll ensure that Africa is great. They'll ensure that we have one currency. They'll ensure that we need no visas. They'll ensure that our resources are kept here. They'll ensure that we define ourselves. They'll ensure that our friends of goodwill do that which is in our best interest. It can be done, it must be done, and it will only be done on your shoulders. And you young men and women who are here, I urge you to be in the forefront, because history has taught me one thing, that the thing you call luck is a product of preparedness and hard work. So prepare, work hard, and you will be lucky. God bless you.